the story of Romulus and Remus, the founder of Rome. In Roman mythology, Romulus and his twin brother Remus were the founders of the city. Romulus and Remus were the direct descendants of Aeneas, whose fate-driven adventures to discover Italy are described by Virgil in the Aeneid. According to the mythology, their father was Mars, Romans the god of war, or in some variations the demigod hero Hercules. There is much debate and variation as to who was the father of Romulus and Remus. However, the Romans historian author Livy claims that Rhea Silvia was in fact raped by an unknown man, but blamed her pregnancy on divine conception. Romulus and Remus's grandfather was Numitor, king of Alba Longa, an ancient city of Latium in central Italy, and father to Rhea Silvia, their mother. Numitor's reign was usurped by Numitor's younger brother, Amulius. He was able to dethrone Numitor and become king. When King Amulius found out that Rhea Silvia was pregnant, it was custom that any Vestal virgin betraying her vows of celibacy was condemned to death. The most common death sentence was to be buried alive. However, King Amulius, fearing the wrath of the paternal god Mars or Hercules King Amulius imprisoned Rhea Silvia and ordered the twins' death by means of live burial, exposure, or being thrown into the Tiber River. He ordered a servant to carry out the death sentence, but in every version of this myth, the servant takes pity on the twins and spares their lives. The servant then places the twins into a basket onto the river Tiber, and the river carries the boys to safety. The river god Tibernus ensured their safety by calming the river, and he caused their basket to catch in the roots of a nearby fig tree. The twins were first discovered by a she-wolf or lupa, who suckled them, and they were fed by a woodpecker or picus. Eventually, they were discovered and cared for by a shepherd and his wife, Faustulus and Acca Laurentia. The two boys grew up to be shepherds like their adoptive father. One day, while they were herding their sheep, they were met by shepherds of King Amulius. These shepherds started a fight with Romulus and Remus got captured and taken by the King Amulius guards. King Amulius believed that Rhea Silvia's children were dead. He did not recognize Remus or Romulus. While Remus was captured, Romulus gathered and incited a band of local shepherds to join him in rescuing his brother. Romulus managed to free his brother, and in the process killed King Amulius. After Amulius' death, the twin rejected the citizens' offer of the crown of Alba Longa and instead reinstated Numitor as king. They left Alba Longa seeking to found their own city, and each set out to find the best locale. The brothers quarreled over the location of the foundation of their new city. Romulus wished to start the city on the Palatine Hill, while Remus wished to found it on the Aventine Hill. In order to settle their disagreement, they agreed to consult augury, a type of prophecy in which birds are examined and observed to determine what actions or persons the gods favor. Each brother prepared a sacred space on their respective hills and began to watch for birds. Remus claimed to have seen 6 birds, while Romulus said he saw 12 birds. Romulus asserted that he was the clear winner by 6 birds, but Remus argued that since he saw his 6 birds first, he had won. The brothers remained at a standstill and continued to quarrel until Romulus began to dig trenches and build walls around his hill, the Palatine Hill. In response to Romulus' construction, Remus made continuous fun of the wall and his brother's city. Remus then jumped over Romulus' wall jestingly, in response to Remus' mockeries and for jumping over his wall. Romulus, angered by his brother's belittlement, and it makes them fight each other. The fight resulted in the killing of Remus at the hands of his brother Romulus. There are several versions as to how Remus was killed. In Livy's version, Remus simply died after jumping over Romulus' wall, which is thought to be a sign from the gods of Rome's power and fate. According to Saint Jerome, Remus was killed for his mockery by one of Romulus' supporters by throwing him with spade on his head. Afterwards, Romulus mournfully buries his brother, bestowing upon him full funeral honors. However, most sources would convey that Romulus killed Remus. Remus' death and founding of Rome are dated by Livy to April 21st, 753 BCE. After his brother's death, Romulus named his city after himself, Roma. Romulus instituted a government system that implemented senators and patricians. As the popularity of his city and government system grew, so did the population. Rome's initial population was supplied by fugitives, exiles, runaway slaves, and criminals and other cast-offs. Due to the inflation of the male population, Rome was unable to produce any generations of their own. As a result of the low ratio of women to men, the newly Roman men decided to abduct women from a neighboring city. They invited the Sabines and Latins to a festival of Cronus at the Circus Maximus. And while the men of these cities were distracted, the Roman men carried off their women into Rome. Many of these women were persuaded to marry. However, in response to this rape or abduction of women, the Sabine and Latin men went to war against Rome. Romulus was the definitive winner of this war, and his victory was Rome's first triumph. Although defeated, the Sabine king, Titus Tatius, attempted to assault Rome by marching on the Capitoline city. The Sabines besieged the Romans, and the Romans almost lost until Romulus prayed to Jupiter for help. Jupiter answered, aiding the Romans to a final victory. Eventually, a truce formed between the Romans and Sabines, along with Tatius and Romulus agreeing to form a joint reign of the kings. They jointly ruled for 5 years and integrated each other's customs, from calendars, gods, and even military tactics. This was a time of peace within Rome, but this intercity harmony ceased due to Tatius' actions. After these prosperous 5 years, Tatius was caught sheltering some of his allies, who had robbed the neighboring allied Lavinians and murdered some of their ambassadors. Tatius was sent to Lavinium, and while in Lavinium, Tatius was assassinated. Romulus became the sole king of Rome for the next 20 years. Romulus sought to expand Rome's land through war. When Numitor died, Romulus incorporated Alba Longa into Rome's government and lands. Through Romulus' reign, he slowly became more autocratic, and the Senate became resentful. The life of Romulus has several endings depending on the myth and source. In one myth, Romulus mysteriously disappeared in a storm or whirlwind. Romulus is claimed to have ascended to the heavens to become a god by several eyewitnesses. There was the suspicion that Romulus' death was plotted by the Senate in order to reassume their own power. Livy writes about these events, while Cassius Dio writes about how Romulus was surrounded by hostile, resentful senators who rent limb from limb the Senate house, which was then followed by an eclipse and sudden storm. Romulus disappeared in 717 BC as reported by Plutarch at the age of 53, but Dionysius of Halicarnassus reports that he died at the age of 55. There is much debate on whether Romulus and Remus were real men or simply a myth or even a combination of both. While most scholars believe that Aeneas, the catalyst of the foundation of Rome, may have existed in some folktale, Romulus and Remus' feats and adventures are somewhat far-fetched to be taken literally, but some scholars attest that their characters may be based on some historic foundation. Foundation myths are often convoluted with aspects of fiction and non-fiction. While it may never be certain if these twin brothers were real, what is certain is that their story was treated with respect and discussed at length even by the ancients.